G'day and welcome back to Talking Leadership TV. Our guest today is Terri Martin. Terri was a previous guest on the podcast and I'm looking forward to sharing our discussion with you. Her career really started in marketing agencies and TV, both in Sydney and London. Over time, she progressed to heading up businesses in the marketing, communications, not-for-profit and education sectors. And she's also provided professional services to organisations such as Microsoft, Unilever, Telstra, Qantas, Lendlease, and the Big Four banks, just to name a few. Terri's now the CEO and founder of The Business Bunch, a consultancy that helps organisations to overcome business challenges by outsourcing part-time experts in the marketing, sales, HR, general management, CEO support, board and advisory board space. She's also the Vice Chair on the board of ADHD Australia and in 2016 was awarded one of only 30 places in the Marketing Academy Leadership Program. Added to this, she regularly mentors career women as part of the Future Women organisation. She's the proud mum of two amazing teenagers, so fully understands the joys and challenges of juggling parenthood with a fulfilling career. And as she states, she wouldn't have that any other way. Thanks again for joining us. We focused our discussion on the differences between general managers and CEOs, as well as talking about a fully hybrid remote working situation and what that means from a leadership context, amongst other issues. As always, thanks again for joining me. If you like the content, please drop a like or subscribe. But as always, enough from me. I'll hand over to Terri. Terri, welcome back, mate. Thank you for joining me again.
Thank you. Lovely to be here, Eric.
Mate, it's been 4 years between conversations and there's been a few things happening in your professional life that I'd love to chat about in the podcast. But first things first, so we've got two topic areas that I'd like to pick your brain on. The first being the difference in leadership when you move from a GM role to a CEO role. Now, in that space, I was of the delusional understanding that CEO and GM were interchangeable positions within a business. Why have I got that wrong?
Look, I think because ultimately they're top leadership positions, and some businesses just have a GM, and some businesses have CEO, and some have both, and it can be confusing. And I know myself, especially if the business isn't huge, you might be thinking, why would I need a GM and a CEO? So I've been a CEO for about 15 years, and now I've stepped into a role. Beg your pardon. I've been a GM for 15 years, and I've now stepped into a role that's CEO. They are actually very, very different. So ultimately, a CEO is visionary. So they're always looking forward, looking at the next challenge, looking at, the eye is on the future, trying to work out what needs to happen and how they're going to get there. A lot of CEOs then aren't always particularly great at the operational. So taking that vision and then going, okay, so what steps do we need to take to actually get there? What team members do we need? Funding? What kind of operational setup do we need? And everything in between. Then perhaps not always that good at that. Whereas GMs actually that's their gig. They're operational. They're supposed to go, I know where we're going, but there's a million steps in between that, and I've actually got to make that happen. Now, don't get me wrong. Some CEOs are brilliant at operational, and some GMs are brilliant at visionary. But I think they are very different roles, and they do take different skill sets. And so, what I see a lot of is a lot of CEO and founders of businesses that have been operational, and they've grown their own businesses, and it's really hard work and it's a hard grind. But they get to a point where they almost, some of them don't know what they don't know next. And so, or they're not sure how to take that next move, or what steps are involved, or what kind of people to hire. And then often they get in their own way. And so they've been brilliant at growing their business to a certain point, and then of course often it stalls. So there's this idea that they want to be bigger, or be in bigger different states, or hire more people, or grow revenue, or whatever that might be. And then there's still the point of contact for everything, and there's still the sign off, and they maybe don't have the capacity nor the capabilities to actually then get it to the next stage. So a GM has that kind of operational know-how to really be able to understand all the steps that are involved, and all the people they've got to talk to, and all the technology that needs to be employed in order to actually bring that vision to life. So if you've got two really good people where you've got one who's visionary and one who's operational, often that's hugely successful, and that can really, really help to drive a business forward.
So, and thank you for clearing that up. That makes a lot of sense. As you started rolling out the definition, what came in my mind is this is probably already being done with those of an entrepreneurial bent that may want to be entrepreneur, founder / CEO, but don't have those operational skill sets. And look, many of the entrepreneurs that I've talked to will freely admit I'm crap at the detail, but I just want to work in that headspace looking forward. And I see the core difference. Now, in your travels, Terri, if I can be so bold, is the GM a good sounding board for the CEO within the business, being the most senior of the managers in the business, or is that the Rubicon that you don't cross if you're a CEO, that you leave your general manager to do the general manager stuff, and that at the CEO level you engage people like the Business Bunch or other organizations to provide tactical, strategic, sort of that foresight thinking that you might need? Well, what's your view there, mate?
That's actually a really good question. So what you don't want is a visionary CEO saying, let's do X. And then you've got a GM going, but we can't because, and that's going to be too hard and that's going to be too expensive. Ultimately, though, you don't want the opposite, which is just a yes man who goes, yeah, we'll do it. And then it fails. It's a really, really fine balance where a really, really good GM would be able to go, listen, I'm going to take your idea and I'm going to work it to the best of my ability, but there may be some roadblocks and there may be some challenges. I will try to overcome them for you, but I'm going to let you know what they are and we'll work around them. And you might have to change your vision slightly, but don't worry, we'll still get to the end goal. And I think, it's a real trust thing. And a lot of CEOs aren't used to working with a GM. So that's why kind of our business is about placing people on a part-time or contract basis, so they can kind of get in there and go, hey, this is actually what you need. And these are the types of people, and we can kind of put it in place. And then we could step out. Maybe the CEO is okay managing it, or maybe the CEO then goes, actually, I do need someone like this full time. And then we can kind of help replace ourselves, if you like, and place someone in there. So I think it's got to be the right person. It's like, you never want to be the yes person. You never want to be the no person. You've got to be yep, I see where we're going. And you've got to trust me to get there. It may not be the path you'd take, CEO, but it will be the right one. So it's a definite balance.
Does the size of the business matter? So why I ask this question is, if you think you need a GM on a part-time basis to build some foundational things, then getting somebody in for a short amount of time to do the GM stuff so you're freed up to do other things is important. But I think there's some learning there for the CEO that if you do really need an ongoing GM presence in the business, then there's going to be some advantages. And I've not played in that space or been involved in organizations where this is done. So I'll go back to the question, does the size of the business matter?
It's going to matter, being blunt, it's going to matter from paying salaries, because a CEO and a GM, let's assume, would be on fairly substantial salaries. So the business needs to be able to carry that. I guess it really, so that's going to be a absolutely key priority, is determining whether the business can afford both salaries and is happy to do so. And that's why sometimes that part-time contract offering is more exciting, because we're not taking a huge cut. You're actually, only offering that as a small amount. I think the other thing too is whether a CEO can really look at themselves and go, yeah, I am really not great at this part. And if I don't get the foundations right at this point, growth won't happen, or it will happen and it will totally fall apart. So what we see again is a lot of, patchwork, because, that'll do, or we'll just do that, or I'm not really sure, let's just hire this person. Oh, that didn't work out because I don't really have experience in, let's say, HR or marketing. And, it's okay for a bit, and then it starts to get wobbly. And then it's when you've really got this vision, right? This growth ambition. And then you find that actually it starts to all fall apart. That's that tipping point, I think, where if you haven't, so I'm a huge believer in getting the foundations of a business right. Like, I truly believe that if you don't do that, it doesn't matter how wonderful a business person you are or what your vision is, it's at risk of falling apart. So it's about really recognizing that that's important to growth, is a little bit of taking a breather, looking at how we've got things, have we got processes in place so that when we hire people, they know the way we do things? Do we have all of our HR correct? Do we have all the JDs done? Are people on the right salaries? Do we have KPIs and ways to measure that in place? There's a whole raft of things. Do we have a CRM, a customer relationship management tool that allows us to capture our details of our clients so they're all in one place? It's all those things that, again, when CEOs and founders are doing business, they're kind of on the fly doing things. This works, quick, let's do that. Great. You're trying to grow the business, and I'm telling you that just won't cut it. And I think that's where that GM kind of thinking and way of seeing things really adds value.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess you're not limited to the number of GMs you could have because of their technical operational specialists. Could you have a scenario where there's a CEO and multiple GMs providing assistance to the CEO in different parts of the business?
That's a really good question. So in very, very big corporates, they structure like that. I would say in small to medium-sized businesses, the answer is probably no, because what you want by nature of a GM is that they're generally managing the whole business. Now, you might have someone like, I've got a head of marketing and a head of finance and a head of HR and a head of production, whatever those roles are that work into the GM. But I think ultimately you want someone with their eye on every single part of the business, and that's ultimately what that GM role does.
Yeah, and that's a good delineation there. I guess is in this context, in this conversation, I should say that will make a difference in thinking about that. I guess one thing before we go on to the next topic area is you really do need to have a founder, entrepreneur, or CEO that is self-reflective enough to know that they need a GM, or maybe they are the GM and they need to hire a CEO. Have you found that conflict without naming the business? Has that come up in your travels, Terri?
Look, I'm going to say not in my travels, because in my past life, I was obviously hired as a GM, right? And so I had, CEOs who recognized that they actually needed support in that way. And we work with businesses who are starting to say, oh, I'm not able to move in the business. I need some support, like how to actually operationally push us forward. So I haven't had that. But what I have seen are businesses actually fall apart because you've got a visionary, a lot of strategy, a lot of forward thinking, lots of ideas, and no one making it happen. And then, or they're trying to make it happen and it's happening too quick and those foundations are weak and it falls apart. So sometimes that can actually be the demise of a business, or the reason why it can't grow beyond a certain point.
My particular interest in whether it's the general manager or the CEO is to understand that he or she has the capacity to be introspective in those roles when they're applying their leadership skill sets, and to understand that you crossing the lines there between those two roles will only make the job more difficult. So the delineation of responsibilities, I would think, is key in that process. Is that true for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So with all great intentions, a CEO can recognize that they need a GM or someone to help them operationally. Then they bring that person in, and then the CEO can not let go of control. And so they're still wanting to sign everything off and still want to see everything and still want to check things and still want to change things. And it negates the need for a GM. Like, a GM won't stay for very long. They'll be like, what's the point of this being micromanaged? I'm too senior, I'm too experienced, this is crazy. So it is one thing to recognize that you need it. It is another thing to recognize that you need to actually get out of their way. And I mean, we know that's right, good leadership, right, Eric, where if the best leaders are those that hire experts who know more than them and let them do their job and trust them to do their job. And, because that's when they'll flourish. It's when people say, yeah, I need a GM. But what are you doing? And can I just check that again? And, we didn't do it like that. And, no, let's have another meeting about that, and they get in their way, and it's never going to work.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. So, Terri, look, let's move on to the next topic area. And if you'll indulge me, I might paint a bit of a picture here in the discussion around leading in a fully remote workplace, because this this is applicable to myself. I'm in a role now that is fully remote, and I'm seeing this out in the world. So post COVID-19, and I wouldn't say exactly post because we're still getting hit with COVID-19. I was in a meeting this afternoon where one of the participants was at home, but dialing in with COVID-19. The future workplace and that move to fully remote workplaces. If I had to ask you, what are the tick boxes? What do you have to tick off to actually move to fully remote and do some? So it's a two-parter. Sorry, I'll be fair. What's the tick sheet to know that you need to do it? And is it an industry specific thing, or is it a business size thing, or something else?
Yeah. So it's really interesting you've come into a business and it's remote. Like that's interesting because that's not what I'm doing and what I've done with my business. I've set it up from being remote from the start. So the things that I consider are, how do I onboard staff? Like, how do I ensure that everyone understands what my business stands for, how we operate, like what's our values, how do we do things? They get that, and there's a proper onboarding process right from the outset. Make sure probably more check-ins than I would normally right at the start to ensure, and make sure it's a open door policy. Now, there is no door, but an open Zoom policy or an open call policy. If there's any problems, they can always call. I also just think that you have to trust, and that can be challenging. I know, because you're used to being able to just go over to someone's desk and say, hey, what's going on? You've actually got to trust them. So again, it's framework. So it might be being very clear on timeline. So we've agreed to deliver a project, be really, really clear on what the timeline for that is, but don't just leave it to the last minute, check in on them. How are you doing? How can you help? Can I help you? Definitely templates and making sure people understand so that they're representing. In my case, of course, I hire either contractors or part-time staff, and then I place them in other people's businesses, right? So they're representing the business bunch, but they're sitting in another office. It's almost double whammy, right? A double challenge, because they're sitting in another culture, another organization. But again, it's being open and honest, ensuring that there are times to connect as well. So making sure there are opportunities for you all to connect and do work together, and maybe once a month or once a week or whatever suits your organization. Make sure, like, I'm not a believer for organizations where you've got employees and they're working full time generally. I'm not a believer in a fully remote offering personally. I think hybrid is better, and there must be opportunities for everyone to come together. I especially think that's important for young staff. I worry about the young staff. If I think about myself and I reflect on my career, I know it would have taken me a lot longer to learn if I hadn't have had the opportunity to watch senior staff members interact, sit on the phone, negotiate, present, talk things through. When I was young, I was always watching, always trying to take it in. How are they doing it? What do I need to do there? Oh, okay, that's a good idea. If you're sitting at home, you're missing out on all of that. And I think that what we will see is probably, staff members who are actually, they're stifled in their growth because of that. So I think it's important to have opportunities to come together, definitely. I think it's hard in your position if you're coming in and, you're new to leadership and you're new in a situation to try and get those relationships going. I hire people where everyone understands the intent. We understand that it's remote. We almost kind of dive in further and, lean in, as the word suggests, lean in and go, okay, we know this is remote, so what do we need to do? So it's, I think there's going to be lots of people talk about this as time goes on. I think you have to be probably more trusting. You need more guardrails and expectations. You need to be clear on things like timings and when things need to be delivered, but also don't expect that they're just going to hit, check-ins. You need to be open to people calling you, texting you, messaging you, all the different platforms, at any time, making it aware that you are open to talk to them at any time they need to. And I think, I think some businesses will flourish. I think some will struggle. I think some people will flourish. I think some people will struggle. I don't think it's a one size fits all. I think it's just going to be time that tells us. And I think, you just ebb and flow to your staff members and what works for them and what works for you. It's a really hard question. It's a really hard area, I think.
You've touched on a lot of things there around the the complexities here, and it's not a simple pathway. The fully remote is easy to say, not so easy to implement. And there are, if you're talking from a leadership lens, and that's the only lens I'm going to bring to this, is there's cultural issues within the business about how do you create a continuous improvement culture when you're all remote. The degree of trust that you need if you're happy to have a geographically distributed business where your experts, the people that you want to place as trusted experts in other people's businesses, are doing what they need to do. So I think the PD of someone in a fully remote workplace will be a little different, and there'll be very different expectations than someone who's working in-house on a daily basis. And I think there's good reasons for that, and you've outlined almost all of them. I think, though, one thing that people still haven't, I think, fully grasped yet is the long-term impact on generations of new leaders as they come through, let alone generations of staff, because the attractiveness of working remote for me was built on a previous role that I had where I was almost fully autonomous, but I was part of a structure, yet the geographic nature of the industry that I worked in kind of lended itself to it. And in this new role, same deal, but I think I've gotten used to it. And for me, and some will have a different view, and I think it's legitimate, extremely so, that I don't need other human beings to get motivated and to do the things I need to do. I don't need a team
Yeah.
environment. I can thrive in those, and I understand why they're important. But for me, I'm talking for me here, I can work by myself because I've hit a point in my career where I've got the professional chops to do what I need to do alone, and it will
Yeah.
just get done. Whereas someone coming in new, and that real worry that you've got, which I share with you, is on the come up. If this had happened to me when I was in my 20s, I'd be real hesitant about the kinds of roles I would want to do. And I don't think industry by and large, and I get your view on this, not all businesses and not all businesses in certain industries will go fully remote because of the nature of their work. I think we're going to have everything from hybrid to traditional to something else in the middle. And I think that works as long as the people in those businesses want it to work. Is that fair call?
100%. So, I've spoken before, actually on TV. I was interviewed about, what is it about these kind of CEOs who are mandating they go back into the office, and I've had discussions with lots of different leaders, and I love hearing different points of view, because there is a different point of view from a business leader or a business owner than there is from an employee. And my belief was, I think it will get to a natural state where people will either stay or they won't, because they'll say, I love the job, I'm happy to come in. Or they'll say, you know what, no, I don't want to travel every day, or I want to be around my kids, or whatever that might be. But I do also understand why businesses are mandating it. Like, I actually get it from that point of view as well. Some businesses have manufacturing plus offices. Well, why can't the manufacturing people work from home? Like, obviously they can't, but that makes it unfair. And it's about providing a culture and a collaboration. And there are some businesses, especially in the creative fields, which really do need collaboration. I think, though, the one thing I'll say is every organization probably has to treat it differently. And the best thing they can do is literally sit down with their employees, or provide them with the mechanics to be able to voice their concerns or their wishes. But I think it's also up to employees to listen to the employer's concerns as well. So an employer could say, I actually find this hard to lead in, or, we've got inconsistencies in our staff, or, and what it would be beautiful is if they could come to an agreement and say, look, we're happy to do hybrid, but perhaps it's only one day you work from home. Or we're happy to come back in the office, but, can we leave an hour early? I don't know what those things are. Like, I personally think the old 9 to 5 thing is gone, or it should do. It's so old and antiquated. But that structure has been in place for so long, it's harder just to get rid of it, right? But I hope that ultimately people run their businesses in collaboration with their staff, saying this is why we're doing this is why as a business we need to do it, and the staff can say, okay, yeah, I understand, well, maybe we could make some concessions over here, or I don't know, it depends.
Yeah.
So I mean, time will tell, right, Eric, with how all this pans out. People are trying to, every business is trying to work it through at the moment.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think from my experiences and some of the leaders that I've seen in the industries that I have had some touch points with is some leaders only really want people back in the office because they can't adjust to a sense of control where they don't have absolute control over their staff. And that, I'm not talking from a dictatorial point of view. It's there are traditional work models that have been inculcated in some people that you're never going to engineer out, irrespective of the fact that you could do any amount of research that might suggest hybrid workplaces are more productive, or trust putting that 100% faith in your staff means you'll get a more productive staff member because they feel the trust. Whereas there'll be some counter arguments, and I can understand where this is coming from, that as the ultimate decision maker and the person responsible for the success of the business, if hybrid doesn't work for whatever reason, you need to have a structure that works for you. And where there is an ability to do more research in this space is when you have a CEO or a GM or an entrepreneur that may be accountable to boards, and there's a friction between what those in the business are doing and what those in the board want to see happen. And I hazard a guess here, but I think it's already happening. Just it's not as televised as people might think, because I think we're all trying to work it out. I for not for one second believe anyone had the right formula when COVID hit. But what it did too is it started to put a bit more bargaining power in the hands of the people that we lead. And without those people, you don't have a successful business. And I think it's incumbent on those in leadership roles to recognize that. And if you don't, and you really don't have to, this is only one opinion, but I think if you don't, you're setting yourself up to fail.
Yeah, and look, at the end of the day, every leader is different, and if a leader wants to invite or mandate that his staff come in, or she mandates that the staff come in, that's their business. And if the staff don't like it, they have every right to leave, and they can go somewhere that's flexible. And someone else will probably come along and say, I'm actually okay with that. So I think, yes, there's, initially I was thinking, I think what you'll see is people lead with their feet. And then I was like, yeah, but that's not the only thing that matters to employees. It's such a, it's so many things matter. It's how you're treated. It's, your career trajectory. It's your salary. It's, do you love what you do at the heart of it? Or you actually feel like you're making your role is worthy. And so some people go, well, actually, that's more important to me than working from home. Some people might say, I actually don't want to work from home. Like, I'm actually done with being around the kids and, the washing and all that kind of stuff. So everyone's different. I think it'll get to a natural state. There'll just be those businesses that are all remote. There'll be those businesses that are hybrid. There will be those businesses that are, all in the office. And people will just decide whether they want to work for them or not. And then that will either change people's, leaders' minds or not.
Yeah, it sounds like the democratic outcome that you would hope to see. But I think in that transition process where there will be a need for professionals is in guiding what the transition might look like, because I for a second don't believe everyone has the skill sets needed to make a change if that's what they want to do. And probably my last point here, and summing up some of what you've said, and I think I've got this right, but I'm happy to have my mind changed, that in the end, CEOs and GMs and entrepreneurs and founders, whatever the title is, you're looking to have an ongoing productive relationship with the people that you work with. You want to achieve your goals, whether it's in a not-for-profit or for-profit space. You have people that you're accountable to, and you want success to look a certain way, but you need your people there to deliver that success. And I think it's maybe the best way to sum this up. It's an ongoing conversation.
That's And I think it's going to be ongoing for quite some time because because I actually don't think there's one solution. And so I think everyone wants a solution. I think everyone's kind of going, oh, we all want to know that hybrid works, or we all want to know that bringing back people will up productivity. And you go, actually, it's probably a lot more to do with how you manage them, the kind of company culture, whether they feel like they can achieve, whether they feel like they're trusted, And like you were saying, you've got those leaders who are set in their ways. Well, they're probably not going to know how to lead a hybrid or remote. And so they're actually not going to get the best out of people because they don't know, how to get out of their way, how to trust them, how to let go of control. So yeah, we'll see, how it all turns out.
I'm optimistic, and it sounds like at the core you are as well. It's just around being realistic about what can be done. So Terri, thank you for your time today, mate.
You're very welcome. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Eric. Thank you.
That concludes our podcast for today. I'd like to thank Terri Martin for her time and, of course, valuable insights into this thing called leadership. Our next podcast drops tomorrow, which is Thursday, the 6th of July. It's a co-hosted podcast with Talking Leadership TV and the Best Practice Network. My co-host and good friend, Mr. Kevin Bennett, will be joining me, and we spoke with Dr. Stephen Morse looking at modern slavery and implications for leadership. It's a very interesting topic area, one that I wasn't familiar with. I hope you'll enjoy it, and as always, please drop a like on the podcast if you're vibing with the content. Subscribe if you can to help us build the channel. Have a good day, rest of the week, and we'll catch everyone on the next episode of Talking Leadership TV.